Welcome to another movie plot. Spoilers ahead. The movie starts in a modern-day village, where a young boy named Omri and his mother Jane return home to celebrate his 9th birthday. Omri receives gifts from all the family, including an old cupboard that his brother Gillen found. Spending the rest of the day with his brother AD at the skate park, Omri receives a little Native American figure made of plastic from his best friend Patrick. That night Omri goes through his mom's box of old keys, and finds one that actually fits the cupboard's keyhole. But without anything to keep inside of it, his mom suggests his new figurine. The next morning Omri wakes to a light tapping coming from inside the cupboard. He hesitantly approaches it when the key suddenly gets pushed out from the inside. Omri opens the cupboard to find it empty, but a tiny Native American person hiding in the corner, his Indian figurine, magically come to life. With Little Bear frightened by his large acquaintance's finger, he pulls out a dagger and takes a stab at it. He pricks the boy's finger and begins calling him a demon and a giant, revealing him to be English-speaking. Before they can communicate any further, Omri's father Victor comes to help him get ready for school, so he locks the cupboard to keep Little Bear a secret. In class Omri waits anxiously for the school day to end, telling Patrick that he loves the gift he got him. When he arrives home after school he races to his bedroom to discover that the Indian has returned to his original plastic. So he spends the rest of the night upset while his brother's pet rat rolls around the house. That night after Victor puts his son to bed, Omri once again hears the tapping noise coming from the cupboard. Overjoyed he rushes over and opens the cupboard to find Little Bear alive once more.
This is magic?
Little Bear is again initially frightened of Omri, but introduces himself as an 18th century Iroquois from the Wolf clan. They debate over who's big and who's small out of the two of them, until Little Bear begins to assume Omri is a great spirit called the Peacemaker in a child's form. With the child creating instant light, his beliefs are supported. Little Bear explains that he learned English in 1761 when he was fighting in the French and Indian War on the side of the British. Omri picks him up in his hand and the two begin to form a friendship. That night Omri finds a plastic teepee for him to sleep, but unsure of the strange material that it's made from, the boy puts it in the cupboard as a test and it becomes real. He tells Little Bear goodnight but does what any kid would do, collects all his toys and puts his favorites in the cupboard. Not thinking things through, the natural enemies begin fighting as the cupboard shakes. So Omri ends their short plastic lives and jumps into bed. In the morning Little Bear decides to stay with Omri, and asks him if he could make him a white man's gun, or show him King George. Omri learns that Little Bear is a widower, and would like tools to build a longhouse to live in, saying that the Onondaga god do not sleep in teepee. Omri learns a lot about the Iroquois, including they don't ride horses, and a longhouse is the mother house of the clan. Little Bear notices the outside and asks the Earth Grasper to take him there, being transported in a Lego box and getting to walk around in modern-day America. When they head back inside, Omri grabs some sticks and leaves for him to build his home, but he is attacked by a pigeon. Little Bear is wounded by the flying dinosaur and tells Omri that he needs some bigger weapons. He tells the boy that he needs husks to stop the bleeding, which the assuming boy goes to check the medicine cabin for some husks. Until coming up with the idea to bring to life his brother's World War I Army medic named Tommy to treat Little Bear's leg. The healer believes he is dreaming and just gets on with his work, before getting startled by the fact that he is working on an Indian. Not meaning any offense but being as ignorant as they come.
How?
Tommy does his duty and patches the wounded soldier up. Then he is put back into the cupboard to continue fighting in the war, hoping to dream of the strange pair again sometime. Jane comes to get Omri for breakfast, and notices that her son is in a better mood than he usually is. With Little Bear now having his new building materials, Omri confuses his mother with a breakfast order of granola and cranberry juice, before grabbing some tools from his father's workshop for the construction of the longhouse. Needing an axe, Omri puts a knight figure in the cupboard, steals his weapon, then throws him away. With Little Bear fed and armed, Omri races off to school where he tells his class a poem about the Indian in the cupboard, as Patrick listens on curiously. Omri trades one of his toys for one from the school's diorama, and returns home to Little Bear having crafted his longhouse. That night Little Bear eagerly talks of hunting and sharing stories with Omri around a fire, as he does with his own people.
Little Bear.
When Omri surprises him with a Mohawk chieftain figurine, saying that Little Bear can have his longbow but they won't keep him alive.
Can I watch?
Little Bear asks to watch the magic and stands next to the box in excitement, as Omri brings the figure to life and snags his bow. However, before Omri can send the chieftain back he begins shaking and suffers a heart attack out of fear. Omri freaks out as he has never seen someone die and believes he has killed him, making Little Bear confused as to why a great spirit would be so frightened at the sight of death. He comes to the realization that Omri really is just a big child, and angrily tells him to send the man back to his home. Omri is reluctant at first that no one will find the body if he was alone when he was summoned to the cupboard. Little Bear tells Omri that he had been guiding his nephew through the woods, to teach him how to be a man when he was taken. He tells the boy that he shouldn't tamper with magic he doesn't understand, so Omri locks the dead chieftain in the cupboard, making him plastic once more. He leaves Little Bear and answers his dad's calling, who is upset after finding his saw blades went missing. Omri lies to protect his new friend and tells Victor that he buried them, so his dad forgives him, saying that they can just buy another set. Omri volunteers to go buy them on his own out of a combination of guilt and wanting to prove his manhood, but as he leaves the hardware store, another kid knocks him into a wall and steals his change. Suddenly Patrick shows up with a plastic cowboy to go with this Indian. While he's gone, Little Bear prepares the plastic chieftain's body for burial, and Omri comes home to find his brothers have discovered Little Bear's longhouse. He kicks their pet rat out of his room to get the two to leave, and reveals his little secret to Patrick, who was hiding from the brothers the whole time, and finally asks Omri to send him home. Leaving his friend alone just for a moment, Omri returns to his room to find Patrick bringing to life a cowboy from 1879. He almost falls to his death but is saved by Omri, and takes a shot at Patrick with his gun, but it does nothing. The cowboy introduces himself as Boohoo Boone and begins tearing up, while Patrick convinces Omri to bring him to school tomorrow as his mother calls him home. Boone hears the word Indian and gets paranoid, trying to take a shot at Little Bear with his revolver when he sees him, but getting put in a drawer by Omri. With Little Bear upset that he would take more people from their homes, Omri brings a deer to life for him to hunt. While he skins his kill, Omri buries the chieftain in a shallow grave, and they go to sleep discussing the issue that Little Bear still needs a wife. In the morning, Boone escapes the drawer and the two mortal enemies begin having a shootout, until eventually Omri wakes up and calms the two down. With Boone set to be taken to school, Little Bear demands to be allowed education like the white man. So the two are forced to behave themselves while Omri carefully brings them to school. Patrick holds onto them during class where the two talk about where they come from, and Little Bear's story of losing his wife to smallpox brings Boohoo to tears. Patrick almost shows them to some classmates when Omri stops him, and they begin arguing in the middle of the hall. With Patrick holding the power to reveal them over Omri, he is convinced that they are not living toys that exist for their amusement, but people just like the two of them. When their teacher realizes that Patrick's bag is the subject of contention, he orders him to open it. Omri yells that they are plastic toys, so Boone and Little Bear act stiff, pretending to be figurines and successfully fooling the teacher. The two friends reconcile and plan a sleepover, having stolen another figurine from the school. When they arrive back at Omri's house, he shows a female figure that he intends to bring to life as a new wife for Little Bear, despite Boone being the one asking for a girl. Just as he is about to lock the figure in the cupboard, the boys realize that the cupboard is missing. Gillen confesses he hid it to get back his rat ball that Omri hid, and tells him that it is in the crawl space but that he never saw a key. With no way to make Little Bear a wife, Boone wishes to be sent home as they have the railroad and a new doctor coming to town. That night the kids along with Little Bear and Boone watch a documentary showing a merciless slaughter of Little Bear's people. He watches on in horror at the sight of them being massacred and draws an arrow taking aim. Boone is enthusiastic at the sight of his boys killing the helpless enemy and fires off his revolver, startling Little Bear, who fires an arrow into Boone's chest. He calls Little Bear his amigo before dropping unconscious.
Little Bear?
Still breathing, they try to do what they can, but without the key they have no way to bring Tommy back to treat Boone's injury. Making matters worse, Jane warns the boys that Gillen's pet rat has escaped and is running around somewhere under the floorboards. With the knowledge that a rat would eat a wounded man, Omri decides to take first watch with the promise of $1 million from Patrick. Later that night, Omri hears the rat beneath him and wakes Patrick, but they find the key stuck in between two floorboards instead. Trying to retrieve it, Omri accidentally pushes it further down and out of sight, so Little Bear volunteers to go under the floor to retrieve it. But soon the rat attacks him, and the boys listen on as a battle between man and beast takes place beneath their feet. Little Bear is victorious and manages to return with the golden key. He is suddenly nearly killed by the rat but is saved by the quick hands Patty. With the key back in hand, Omri brings Tommy back to life so he can treat Boone's wounds, and says he was about to die in the war before waking up in the cupboard. While Boone is being examined by the good doctor, Omri goes to the bathroom to retrieve medical supplies, and thinks to himself that it may be time to return the small soldiers to their respective time periods where they belong. Omri sends Tommy back to his own time after he finishes treating the wounds, as Boone wakes up saying that he is ashamed of himself for what his people have done to Little Bears. Later that night as Patrick sleeps, Omri attempts to bring the female to life, not wanting Little Bear to go home alone, but Little Bear notices and stops him, saying that she probably has a family of her own and forcing her to be with him would be cruel. The next morning Omri and Patrick say their goodbyes to their little friends. Boone hopes that time has passed but Little Bear doesn't, saying that he hopes that he is still teaching his nephew to be a man, and that if Omri was his nephew he would be the right age for it. Just before going, Little Bear performs a ritual and Omri has a vision of a life-sized version of him, telling him that when he leaves him, he takes him on as his nephew. The two amigos say their goodbyes to one another, and Little Bear asks Omri if his tribe are always great people. Omri says that they are but that things won't always be so good for them, that things will change. The two tearfully look at each other, when Little Bear yells now and they assume position, being turned back into plastic in their original poses. Omri's book report on Little Bear assures his classmates that although he doesn't know how his life ended, he would have found a new wife and had lots of children. And the movie ends.
Goodbye, my friendly giants.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.